the fourth crime scene of the morning. Just 10 o'clock and we've already been to the scene of a house being broken into, 320 bullets sprayed, grenades, 3 people being kidnapped and 1 killed, 5 bodies being dumped, another house being shot up, and now this scene as well, the body dumped naked on this road. Very tense in Culiacan, and you see the turf war is really starting to kick off.
Sinaloa State in northwest Mexico is being savaged by a brutal civil war inside the Sinaloa Cartel, one of the biggest drug trafficking organizations on the planet. Since September the 9th, the 2 main factions, the Chapitos and the Mayos, have been fighting battles to control the state capital of Culiacan and towns and cities from Mazatlan on the coast to the border with Durango. The official body count in Sinaloa since the war kicked off is stunning. More than 520 confirmed murders, almost 600 disappearances, 46 shot dead by soldiers, 1,400 cars and trucks stolen. And this could be an underestimate because amid the violence, journalists are struggling to report on the rural parts of Sinaloa. Residents of Culiacan, or Coliches as they're called, are suffering the effects. Schools have been shuttered, people cower in their homes, many have left, billions in business has been lost. Coliches even refer to it as a narco-pandemic, like a COVID lockdown, but because of violence. In this video I'm going to look at what caused the war, what it's like on the streets, how the fighting is playing out, and what could finally put an end to the Sinaloa Cartel Civil War. Part 1. Sinaloa is known as the cradle of Mexican drug trafficking. In other words, it's like to cartels as Sicily is to the Italian mafia. Chinese migrants are believed to have first bought opium here when they came to sweat on railroads and labour down mines in the late 19th century. By the 1920s, Sinaloa had a budding industry of gomeros, scraping opium gum for heroin dealers like La Nacha over in Sierra Juarez. Over the decades, Sinaloa produced some of the biggest drug traffickers the world has ever known. They moved ton after ton of mota or marijuana, perico or cocaine, chiva or heroin, and later crystal meth, and finally the catastrophic fentanyl. There was Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, a former cop who organised the drug trade in the 80s. His crazy and charismatic partner, Rafael Caro Quintero, Ernesto Fonseca, and Arturo the Beard Beltran Leyva. But the most well-known of all was El Chapo, or Joaquin Guzman Loera, who dominated the Sinaloa drug trade in the 2000s, along with his partner Ismael El Mayo Zambada. Now, El Chapo was the most infamous, escaping prison twice, giving an interview to Sean Penn, and after a spectacular final capture, he was extradited to the United States and had a show trial in New York in 2018 to 19. But on the ground in Sinaloa, Mayo could have actually been more powerful. Mayo was born in either 1948 or 1950, according to which source you believe. He ran dope for half a century and amazingly never set foot in prison. After Chapo was extradited, 4 of his sons took over his empire. Iván Archibaldo, the top boy, along with Jesus Alfredo, Joaquin Jr. and Ovidio. They became known as Los Chapitos, or the Little Chapos. Older traffickers underestimated these youngsters who had gone to private schools and inherited their father's business, but they proved themselves. In 2017, they outgunned a lieutenant of Chapos called El Damaso. Then in 2019, the Federal Police and Army tried to arrest Ovidio, and they sent more than 700 gunmen onto the street, kidnapping soldiers and terrifying residents until the government released him. It became known as El Culicanazo and cemented their reputation. But there were 2 big factors weighing down the Chapitos. First, American overdose deaths soared to over 100,000 per year, with fentanyl present in 70% of cases. Washington put pressure on Mexico to crack down on fentanyl traffickers, and grand juries approved indictments of the Chapitos. In January 2023, over 3,000 soldiers swept on Sinaloa and recaptured Ovidio. He was rushed to Mexico City before the gunman could get him back, and quickly extradited to the US. The Chapitos looked vulnerable. Secondly, Mayo was still the top boss in Sinaloa and was respected by players from Los Angeles to Colombia. Friction grew between the old guard of the Mayos and the upstart Chapitos. A cold war brewed between them. The Chapitos would make it go red hot. Part 2. At 4 p.m. on July 25th, a Beechcraft King Air plane landed in the Doña Ana County jetport near El Paso and was greeted by federal agents, FBI, DEA, HSI. Stepping out of the aircraft and into custody was none other than the kingpin himself, Ismael Almao Zambada, along with one of the Chapitos, Joaquin Jr. It was an incredible news story that sent tremors around the globe, but what the hell had really happened? A first version was leaked by FBI agents and reported by major American media. Joaquin Jr. had tricked Mayo onto the plane to check out clandestine airstrips in Sonora, but Joaquin flew him to the United States and into the hands of agents. Yet the story had gaping holes. Mayo was at a level he didn't need to check out airstrips, and where was his security? A second version then came out from some experienced narco-journalists that Mayo had handed himself in. He just walked off the plane to the agents without a struggle. He had long had deals with US agents, and now he was going to retire north of the border. But then quickly a third version emerged that seemed closer to the truth. This account would come from Mayo himself via his lawyer and from members of his entourage. It's now recognised as the most likely scenario. Mayo was tricked to go to a meeting with high-level cartel members and politicians. A former rector of Sinaloa State University, Hector Melesio Cuen, was to be there, as well as members of the Chapitos and even, Mayo claimed, the Sinaloan governor. The meeting was in a massive house in the Huertos de Pedregal residential community of Culiacan. Mayo went to the meeting with 4 bodyguards and his personal assistant, or what is known in the cartel world as a secretario. Mayo went in first with 3 bodyguards, but gunmen subdued them and took Mayo hostage. A group of men assaulted me, knocked me to the ground and placed a dark-coloured hood over my head, Mayo said in the letter. They tied me up and handcuffed me, then forced me into the bed of a pickup truck. The gunman took Mayo to a ranch and onto the plane with his wrist bound. Then Joaquin Jr. and the pilot flew him into the hands of the Americans. This could be in the hope it would secure a deal for the Chapitos with US justice. There are still questions about what role American agents themselves played in this capture. Had they planned it out with the Chapitos? Did they provide the plane and pilot, which they deny? Were they even on the ground for the operation? Whatever their role, there had been a rendition of Mayo involving the Chapitos, which was a huge act of treason in the cartel. Initially, Sinaloa was weirdly calm, but narcos have learned not to react right away, but to plan and prepare. Mayo's son, known as El Maito Flaco, took over his father's organization. He made deals with other warlords and narco families in the Sinaloa cartel to provide money, guns, and sicarios. And on September 9th, 6 weeks after the adoption, they attacked. Part 3. In the first week of the war, I bolted up to Sinaloa to see how it was playing out on the ground. I went on the beat of the crime photographers on Nota Roja with an old friend, Fidel Durán. Okay, just off the plane here in Culiacan, and already we've something happening. A bunch of vehicles, National Guard, police, and cars that look like regular cars just full of guys with guns. I've been covering Sinaloa since 2008, but I've never seen it as crazy as this. The city police had completely disappeared. People said it's because they worked with the Chapitos and were scared of being targeted. Instead, the army, National Guard and Marines moved in force. There were also cars of gunmen zipping about, and you weren't sure if they were federales or gangsters. The Cartel squads throw spikes on the road like this one to punch the tires of troops pursuing them. Every day I was there had multiple murder scenes like on this Sunday.
About 5:45 got the call from Fidel that there's a woman found dead and 3 people being kidnapped. Sunday morning in Sinaloa, trying to go and find out more details and get to the scene.
Here we see the police collecting up hundreds of bullets. The gunman had stormed the house at 4 a.m. and fired 320 rounds and a grenade. They kidnapped 3 people and shot dead a 19-year-old girl in the shower. Here's the police pulling the body out. We immediately got news of the next incident. We sped across town and found it was even worse.
So we're in this murder scene, which is the second so far this morning, before 8 a.m. and it's 5 dead bodies that have been dumped. They have sombrero hats on them, which could be a symbol of trying to humiliate the victims, saying they're on the side of the Mayos faction. It's a very bad war erupting in Sinaloa.
This technique of leaving symbols on the bodies can be called body messaging. The hats on these represent the Mayos. The chapitos are also known as the chapizo or chapizza, and their bodies are left with pizza boxes. However, it's not totally clear if the symbols represent the victims or the calling cards of the killers. The third scene we went to was of a house very heavily shot up. The fourth was a dirt road in a poor neighbourhood. The victim had been kidnapped, murdered, and his body dumped.
I got to this scene on a dirt road and there's a body dumped naked. This is victim number 7 in terms of deaths, plus at least 3 people who have been kidnapped, and it's only 10 a.m.
Residents living around this violence are terrified. They're scared the gunman could come into their homes or kidnap their children, especially if they have sons who are young men. A woman told me that her guts were messed up with this stress. After a few days I felt the same way. The soldiers were also on edge. I went to this scene where a gunman had shot dead a soldier in the early morning. The troops were very tense and aggressive about us filming. We went out to the countryside to see Marines busting a fentanyl lab. You can see here they're also hostile to make us leave.
So we come back about 300 metres. There's a pretty nasty smell in the air. It could be from a fentanyl lab that they bust. And the Marines look quite pumped up, but there could have been some confrontation, some shootout. And journalists are just holding back a distance. But also it's getting dark, and we're a bit stuck in the countryside, and we've got to be aware of like narco checkpoints trying to get back into Culiacan.
I was quite pleased to finally leave that scene though, because the smell of cooking fentanyl was even worse than the stench of corpses in the morning. Just a quick pause from the documentary to say to you, if you're into this world of organised crime and drugs, guerrillas and psychedelia, then why not check out www.crashoutmedia.com. For completely free, you can find all kinds of special reports, analysis and videos, including this film, completely uncensored. And if you want to go further and find the full package and support this work, then for just $5 a month, price of a cup of coffee, you become a Crash Out member. Now, back to the film. Part 4. So how is the war really playing out? The two factions get into some direct shootouts, especially in rural areas, but the presence of thousands of soldiers makes it harder for cartel forces to so openly expose themselves, so they sneak around attacking the houses of operatives, ambushing them or abducting them off the streets. The Chapitos have their base in the heart of Culiacan, including in wealthy neighbourhoods. The Mayos have their base in the countryside to the south and in the semi-rural suburbs of the city. Both sides have lost a lot of people. With over 1,000 deaths and disappearances, this has taken a toll on their forces. But they keep on recruiting and bringing new killers from different parts of Mexico and beyond. Cartels have been employing mercenaries from Colombia, El Salvador, Guatemala and even the United States they can keep getting cannon fodder for the war. The factions also wage a propaganda battle to win the civilian population to their side. The Mayos drop these leaflets, encouraging people to inform them about the Chapitos, who they say do shakedowns. It's difficult to be sure which side is winning, but various people there said that by early December, the Mayos had run the Chapitos out of towns to the south of Culiacan and were gaining in the city. The brothers, who had been underestimated themselves, may have underestimated Maito Flaco. But a real victory would likely need the Chapitos or Maito Flaco to be arrested or killed. There's been too much blood spilled to stop it otherwise. Cartel wars can stretch on for long times though. When the Sinaloa Cartel battled the Juarez Cartel, it lasted over 3 years and saw 9,000 dead. This war may only be beginning.